Hello, welcome to Recitation 8. This recitation is mainly about the JavaScript functions. The purpose of this recitation is to practice the creation and modification of JavaScript functions. And this recitation is related to the content of our chapter 19 of the Fluency textbook. Okay, so first, maybe we can talk about the usage of JavaScript functions. In the previous recitations, we have talked about how to add some text boxes, the buttons and radio buttons to your web application. And we can just connect the on-click or on-change events with our text boxes or buttons in JavaScript. And to build up a more complicated web application, we need to just introduce the JavaScript functions. And the functions is highly related to some events or some real functionalities in our real world. From the beginning, we also need to open the Visual Studio Code, this IDE software for the programming. Next, you should also click the file and open a folder as a working space. I select Recitation 8 as my working space. And now let's come to our task 1. Our task 1 is to build up a cube power functions. We also need to just create a new file. We name it as cuber function.html. And we just type exclamation and press tab to build up the basic structure. We also need to change the title of this HTML file as cube power function. I find that there are still some students who cannot figure out how to use the command tag. I can talk about this command tag right again. The command tag is pretty easy. Just the smaller than sign and exclamation and like this. This is the command tag of the JavaScript of the HTML code. We can just add a brief introduction to the cube power function. We want to build up a cube power function, which is compute the and also we can click view and check the to go word wrap. We just compute the x times x times x, which is x cubed, given an input x. This is what we want to realize in our HTML file. Okay. Now we also need the script tag to write your JavaScript code within the script tag. And I need to just introduce the basic structure of a function. The basic structure is function. After function is the function name. First is a function. Then it is function name. After function name is the parameters. And then with an pair of brackets, we need to return the computation result of our build-up function. And for this cube power function, the function name we name it as cuber. And the parameters or called the inputs are a number And what we want to return is number times number times number. This is a function of cuber, right? If right now we open this HTML code with live server, it will not present anything because this is just the build-up function, but it is now run. The function is just declared. Once we use some other code to call this function will operate. Okay, now we add some necessary variables as inputs and then call this function we have built up, like variable my number equal to 7. Then document write. This function is to just write a line of text into our web page. And document write, the text reminder is a cube of plus my number plus is plus cuber. Right now we need to just use this function name to call this function and to use this function. The cuber is a function name and we use the function name to call this function, and we need an input which is a parameter, and the parameter right now is my number. This is the usage of this function. This is how we call this function. We need to use the function name and give the function a parameter as the input. The very important problem is that your parameters right here is num, which is number, can be different from your input when you call this function. When you call this function, what you want to input to this function is some variables you have defined in your code. When you just build up this function, we want to declare this function. You can use another name for the parameters, for the inputs. But within your function which you build up, the parameters should be the same as the parameters right here, right in the place where you declare your function. Okay, this is the completed code, and open with live server. You can see the cube of 7 is 343. This is our first function we have just declared using JavaScript code. It is pretty easy, right? Now let's come to a much more complicated problem, which is to compute the compound interest. Our second task is to create a function to calculate the amount of money accumulated based on a deposit, interest rate, number of periods per year the interest was being paid, and the number of years the money was in the bank. So if we want to just compute the compounded interest given the money, we should have 4 inputs. Now let's just create a new HTML file. We name it as interest.html and type an exclamation and then press tab. We make it as compounded interest rate. Now I can tell you how to compute the compounded interest rate. What is the formula of the compounded interest rate? And the money is equal to C times 1 plus r over n to the n times t. And now I can just explain what is the meaning of what is the repetition of the four variables of C, R, N, and T. So C right here, it means the amount deposited. It is the amount of money which you deposited into the bank. And next is T. T represents for number of years deposited. Next is R. R represents for the annual interest rate. Next parameter is N. N represents for number of interest payments per year. Uh, Actually, this formula for computing the compounding interest is said like this, and you don't need to care too much about how this is computed. You just want to know this is your formula, and given the four inputs CTRN, you can use this formula to compute out your money, your compounded interest. Because the code is just line by line, and I have to write the formula like this. And if you and this is the original representation of this formula, which is money equal to C times 1 plus R over N to the N times T. Okay, now let's start our coding. And also we need this script tag, and we can define and declare our function, which is interest rate. And we have four inputs, which is C, T, R, N, right? C represents for the amount, and T represents for number of years deposited. R is annual interest rate. N is number of interest payments per year. And now we can compute the total deposited, which is the commodity money as. Now we want to introduce a new function, which is called mass.round. So the usage of this function is first there is capital M and then mass dot. You should remember this dot, mass dot round. And this is a rounding function. And after this, please remember our formula. We need to just compute as C times. And another function is mass dot power. Mass dot power should have two inputs. First is the number, is a x, and the second is the order of the power. And for our formula, the order of the power is n times t, right? And the input, the x, is 1 plus r over n. So for our mass dot power function, we should have the x and should have the y. The x is 1 times r over n. And our y, the power of order, is n times t. And don't forget the semicolon after that. And we return this computation result, which is total step. Okay, cool. This is the function. right? This is a function we have declared for compute the interest rate, the compounded interest. And now we should have some inputs. We can declare some variables like c equal to 100, t equal to 1, r equal to 0.1, and n equal to 1. Okay, we also use the document.write this function to write the computation result to our web page. And the total amount accumulated is then plus interest. Then we call this function we have defined is iterate. The function name is iterate, and we should have 4 inputs, which are ctrn. We make it as ctrn. Also need to check the word wrap. Please check the default word wrap to make everything appear within one page, like this. Now we can open with Lab Server to check that the total amount accumulated is 110. I think if you just compute the interest rate given the predefined CTRN manually, you can get the right result as 110. Now, please recall what we have talked about in the previous recitation. We can use a prompt command to collect the user data, user inputs. Now, let's add the prompt command to collect the user inputs, and we can just change the variable name to make it more readable. CS represent for original amount equal to prompt. Enter. The text reminder is enter the initial deposit. We can also use the 1 times to ensure that our input is a number. What we collect from the users are a number, a value. Second is number of years, which is t, is 1 times prompt. The reminder is enter the number of years to be deposited. The third scalar, the third variable is annual interest rate. This is 1 times prompt. Enter the number of interest payments per year. And the last one is number pay year. It is 1 times prompt. Enter the number of interest payments per year. Okay, now we have collected all the variables from the users, and now we need to just change the input variable name as first is C is original amount, and next is number of years, and the third is annual interest rate, and last one is number paid year. Okay. Let's just declare this part once again. This is the variable name we have defined, and when we call this function, we just write the function name as interest rate, and then we can use the variable names we have defined in our code as the inputs to this function, rather than the parameters we write here. We don't need to use ctrn. We don't need to keep the same of the parameters name to the input variable name. We can define our own variables, given them different variable names, and when we call this function, we can just write the variable name as the inputs. But you should remember one important thing is that the order should be the same, which is the original amount should be corresponding to C, and the number of years should be in the second place, which is corresponding to T. The order should be the same as you define the parameters. This is very important. Okay, and don't forget the semicolon. Now open with Live Server, and we make it as 100, 1.1, and 1. The total amount accumulated is also 110. Okay, this is our second job, which is to compute the compounded interest. This is a compounded interest function. Let's continue to the third task. Third task is to compute the volume of a pyramid. We name it as volume HTML. Let's create a different HTML file for the third task. And just press tab and change the title name as volume pyramid. The formula to compute the volume of a pyramid is like this. We just the volume of a pyramid should be equal to area of the base times the height. Then divide this number by 3. This is a formula, and we also need to use the script code, a script tag to add the JavaScript code. Then write the function command, add a function name as volume pyramid. And our input are two parameters, right? First is area of base, and the second is the height, right? And what we need to return is area base times height over 3. It is very easy, actually. We can declare our own variables. First is area. We make it as area of Giza pyramid is equal to 52,900, and the variable height of Giza pyramid is equal to 146.5 meters. Okay. We also use the document.write to write the computation result to the web page, and then the volume of the pyramid of Giza. Then plus, we call this function using the predefined function name as volume pyramid, and the inputs. The first input is area base, which is area of Giza. Second input should be the height, and which is height. Let's check the to-go word wrap once again, which is height of Giza. And you can open with Lab Server. Or you can just stop now to write your version of function of computing the volume of a pyramid, and open with Live Server. Oh, sorry, there should be something wrong. Let me check that. Oh, I'm sorry. It should be document.write. Document.write. This bug, a small bug. And open with Live Server. You can see the volume of pyramid of Giza is a very big number. And also you can use the math.round. Math.round. Then go back. You can see it has rounded up to an integer, which is a very big number. The volume of the pyramid of Giza is a very big number. This is our third task, which is about the function of computing volume of pyramid. This is all about our recitation 8, which is to write some JavaScript functions. Okay, that's all. Thank you.